Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Day 2 in the Hasaan District In-Service Training. For today's topic, we shall walk through the DepEd Order Number 31 Series of 2020, Interim Policy Guidelines for Assessment and Grading in light of the Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan, and DepEd Order Number 8 Series of 2015, Policy Guidelines for Classroom Assessment for the K-12 Basic Education Program. Interim Policy Guidelines for Assessment and Grading in light of the Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan based on DO 31 Series 2020. Rationale: the continuing threat of COVID-19 in the country and the world brings about unprecedented challenges to basic education. As schools prepare for school year 2020-2021, teachers and parents must adapt to alternative learning modalities to ensure that learners achieve essential curricular goals. This will require creative and innovative ways of designing optimal learning experiences and assessing learning progress effectively under adverse circumstances. As stated in DepEd Order Number 8 Series 2015, the policy guidelines in classroom assessment for the K-12 Basic Education Program, assessment should be used to inform and improve classroom practices and promote learning outcomes. However, in distance or blended learning environments, it is necessary to utilize alternative tools and strategies for assessing and supporting learning while avoiding creating undue pressure on the teachers, learners, and their families. Scope: this DepEd order provides for the interim policy guidelines for assessment and grading in light of the Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan, or BELCP, that will be implemented by public elementary and secondary schools nationwide this school year 2020-2021. Private schools, technical and vocational institutions, and higher education institutions, including state and local universities and colleges offering the K-12 Basic Education Program, are encouraged to implement these interim policy guidelines as well. Private schools and institutions are permitted to modify these policy guidelines according to their philosophy, vision, and mission, with the approval of the respective DepEd Regional Office. Definition of terms. For the purposes of this policy, the following terms are defined as follows. Letter A. Classroom assessment. Classroom assessment is an ongoing process of identifying, gathering, organizing, and interpreting qualitative and quantitative information about what learners know and can do. Formative assessment. Formative assessment is a process that involves teachers using evidence of what learners know and can do to inform and improve their teaching. This process, through the teacher's immediate feedback, enables students to take responsibility for their own learning and identify areas where they do well and where they need help. Summative assessment. Summative assessment is an assessment that is usually administered toward the end of the learning period to measure the extent to which the learners have mastered the essential learning competencies, the results of which are recorded and are used to report the learner's achievement. Grading. Grading is a way of reporting assessment data by assigning a value to the results as a record of students' ability, achievement, or progress. Policy statement. The Department of Education is committed to ensure educational continuity in this time of crisis, while looking after the health, safety, and well-being of all its learners, teachers, and personnel. Schools must adopt assessment and grading practices that can most meaningfully support student development and respond to varied contexts at this time. This policy is grounded on the following principles. Assessment should be holistic and authentic in capturing the attainment of the most essential learning competencies. Assessment is integral for understanding student learning and development. A variety of assessment strategies is necessary, with formative assessment taking priority to inform teaching and promote growth and mastery. Assessment and feedback should be a shared responsibility among teachers, learners, and their families. And assessment and grading should have a positive impact on learning. Teachers, school leaders, learners, and parents must commit to uphold the integrity of learning and instruction in the context of distance education. The main desired outcomes of this policy are: letter A, to ensure that all learners are fairly assessed and graded in the continuation of education during this health crisis, and to emphasize that learning standards shall be attained with the provision of reasonable leniency and considerations for possible difficulties met by the learner. Procedure. Distance learning poses challenges for teachers and learners in the conduct of assessment, including limitations in giving feedback and the need to account for different contexts in designing, implementing, and grading assessment tasks. To address these challenges, learners, teachers, and parents or guardians each have significant roles and responsibilities. Teachers. For this school year, particular focus will be given to the following: designing the assessment to allow for flexibility in multiple modalities. Number 2, communicating to learners and parents or guardians the design and standards for grading assessment. Number 3, setting up mechanisms to monitor and record progress remotely. Number 4, giving timely, constructive, and relevant feedback. And 5, facilitating remediation. Learners. Learners are expected to be proactive in updating their teacher of their situation, progress, and challenges encountered. A non-mandatory self-monitoring tool may be accomplished independently or with the assistance of their parent or guardian if necessary. It is not required to accomplish the self-monitoring tool, but its usage is highly recommended to keep track of learners' academic progress. Parents and guardians. Department of Education aims to develop independent learners who can study and work on the assessment on their own. However, in the school year's implementation of distance learning modalities, parents and guardians will play a crucial role in guiding their children in adapting to the changes of distance learning processes. Thus, only when necessary, parents or guardians are requested to assist in the assessment process by: number 1, communicating with the teacher to give updates on their child's situation, progress, and challenges encountered. And number 2, guiding their children in accomplishing the assessment task and or monitoring tools designed by their teacher. Planning assessment. Teachers need to be creative and flexible in assessing student learning while still adhering to the principles of quality assessment practice. With safety, health, and well-being foremost in mind, assessment decisions must be made in the best interest of all learners, ensuring that all assessment activities, number 1, or letter A, align with the most essential learning competencies. Letter B, are reliable, valid, and transparent. Letter C, are fair, inclusive, and equitable. Letter D, are practical and manageable for both learners and teachers. Letter E, Give learners a range of ways to demonstrate their learning. And F. To provide timely and accurate information as basis for feedback. In distance learning modalities, teachers shall design assessments bearing the assumption that the learners will asynchronously take them and have open access to various resources. When deciding on which assessment methods to use, it is important to consider the following questions. What is the purpose of the assessment? What will be assessed? Which method would best allow learners to demonstrate what they have learned, considering their learning modality? Which method would make it easy to gather evidence of learners' progress over time? Will the assessment be completed individually or in groups? Will the assessment be taken at the same time or submitted within a specific period? How will class size affect the ways the assessment will be conducted? How can technology help? In order to inform and promote growth and mastery, formative assessment strategies should establish clear learning targets and success criteria, elicit useful evidence of learning, provide timely and effective feedback, engage learners in assessing and improving each other's work, and increase ownership of their own learning. Annex A provides a matrix of sample techniques for each formative assessment strategy. Teachers are highly encouraged to adopt these techniques where appropriate and to explore other alternatives that are feasible in their respective context. Formative assessment is about getting better, so it should be specific, frequent, repetitive, and free from the restrictions of grading. It should target skills that are necessary to the attainment of learning competencies as measured in summative assessments. To evaluate student learning at particular points in each quarter, summative assessments shall continue in the form of written works and performance tests. Written work shall be administered to assess essential knowledge and understanding through quizzes and long or unit tests. Items should be distributed across the cognitive process dimensions, using a combination of selected response and constructed response formats so that all are adequately covered. Performance tests refer to assessment tests that allow learners to show what they know and are able to do in diverse ways. They may create or innovate products or do the performance-based test, including skill demonstrations, group presentations, oral work, multimedia presentations, and research projects. It is important to note that written outputs may also be considered as performance tests. Annex B provides lists of sample summative assessments that fall under performance tests for the purpose of this policy. Performance tests must be designed to provide opportunities for learners to apply what they are learning to real-life situations. In addition, teachers should take into consideration the following. Each task must be accompanied with clear directions and appropriate scoring tools to help learners demonstrate their learning. Teachers are advised to collaboratively design and implement performance tasks that integrate two or more competencies within or across subject areas. Complex tasks may be broken down into shorter tasks to be completed over long periods of time. Learners must be given flexibility in the accomplishments of these performance tasks to consider time and resources available to them. Nonetheless, all learners within a class should be assessed on the same competencies using the same scoring tool. Teachers must exercise their professional judgment in carrying out summative assessments, providing enough opportunities for learners to practice and to redo their work whenever necessary. so that they can reach their learning targets with the least amount of pressure. Teachers should set realistic expectations and use their professional judgment to find a good balance between what is effective and what is feasible to accomplish remotely. Conducting research remotely. Communicating the assessment task. In communicating the assessment task, teachers must ensure that the following details are explained: objectives of the assessment task, roles of learners and parents or guardians, procedure and expected timeline, and standards and rubrics. The teacher must consult the learners and, when necessary, parents and guardians to allow room for adjustments, flexibilities needed if any. Record of progress. The collection and recording of evidences of learning is integral for monitoring student learning and development. Listed below are some sample strategies for this purpose. Letter A, self-monitoring tool. B, check-ins for teacher with learner. C, evidence of learning in the student's learning portfolio. Feedback and remediation. To benefit student learning, both formative and summative assessment must be accompanied with timely, constructive, and meaningful feedback based on the learner's record of progress. In giving feedback, teachers need to maximize available communication options. For example, writing feedback on the output, texting feedback via SMS, and using online channels, among others. Annex F provides a guide to help frame decisions on appropriate feedback to learners. Consistent with DO number 8, Series 2015, teachers should ensure that learners receive remediation when they earn raw scores which are consistently below expectation in summative assessments by the 5th week of any quarter. This will prevent a student from failing in any learning area at the end of the year. Grading and promotion. The challenges brought to light by the coronavirus pandemic, specifically the implementation of different distance learning delivery modalities, have sparked a larger conversation about the role grades play in student learning, prompting education sectors to rethink traditional grading schemes. The grading system implemented in this interim policy provides reasonable leniency to learners who are put to a larger disadvantage by the pandemic, but at the same time does not compromise the integrity and principles of assessment and grading. Written works and performance tasks shall be administered to assess the content and performance standards that describe the knowledge, abilities, and skills that learners are expected to demonstrate. These tasks could be designed to include the following: students' learning portfolio that document all the evidence of learning within the grading period, including self-reflections, self-evaluations of performance tests, guided by rubrics, and self-selected best outputs in learning modules. Minimum of 4 written works and 4 performance tests within the quarter, preferably 1 in 2 weeks, integrating 2 or more competencies. All competencies should be covered by the performance tests. Example, a performance test can be used to assess science, math, and English all together for certain topics. For the current school year, quarterly assessment shall not be administered. However, days allotted for quarterly assessment in DepEd Order Number 7, Series 2020, or the school calendar and activities for school year 2020-2021 may be used for the presentation of major performance for the quarter that address the performance standard. Quarterly examinations were given a weight of 20% constantly in DO number 8, Series 2015. Since it will no longer be part of the grading system for this school year, its previously determined weight was distributed equally into written works and performance tests, allotting an additional 10% to each component. This maintains an emphasis on performance tests for some learning areas. Weight distribution of the summative assessment components per learning area for grades 1 to grade 10. For languages, Araling Panlipunan and ESP, written works is 40% and performance tasks is 60%. For science and math, written works is 50% and performance tasks is another 50%. For MAPE, EPP, and TLE, written works is 30% and performance tasks is 70%. Weight distribution of summative assessment components for senior high school. For core subjects, written works is 40% and performance tasks is 60%. For academic tracks, all other subjects, written works is still 40%, performance tasks is 60%. Work immersion, research, business enterprise, simulation, exhibit, and performance, written works is 50% and performance tasks is another 50%. For technical, vocational, and livelihood or TBL, sports, arts, and design tracks, all other subjects, written works 30%, performance tasks is 70%. Work immersion, research, exhibit, and performance, written works is still 30% and performance tasks is 70%. Policy guidelines for classroom assessment for the K-12 Basic Education Program based on DO number 8 series of 2015. DepEd Order number 8 series 2015 defines classroom assessment as the ongoing process of identifying, gathering, organizing, and interpreting quantitative and qualitative information about what learners know and can do. An integral part of curriculum implementation that allows teachers to track and measures learners' progress and to adjust their instruction accordingly. It informs the learners as well as their parents and guardians of their progress. All classroom assessment is based on criterion reference assessment, or the approach where teachers develop and use specific assessment criteria drawn from the curriculum standards and competencies to evaluate a learner's individual performance. Theoretical basis. Classroom assessment is a joint process that involves both teachers and learners. It is an integral part of teaching and learning. Teachers provide appropriate assessment when they aim to holistically measure learners' current and developing abilities while enabling them to take responsibility in the process. This view recognizes the diversity of learners inside a classroom, the need for multiple ways of measuring their varying abilities and learning potentials, and the role of learners as co-participants in the assessment process. At the heart of this assessment framework is the recognition and deliberate consideration of the learner's zone of proximal development. Appropriate assessment is committed to ensure learner success in moving from guided to independent display of knowledge, understanding, and skills, and to enable them to transfer this successfully in future situations. From this point of view, assessment facilitates the development of learners' higher order thinking and 21st century skills. This view of assessment, therefore, acknowledges the unity of instruction and assessment. Assessment is part of day-to-day lessons and extends the day-to-day classroom activities that are already in place in the K-12 curriculum. What is classroom assessment? Assessment is a process that is used to keep track of learners' progress in relation to learning standards and in the development of 21st century skills, to promote self-reflection and personal accountability among students about their own learning, and to provide basis for the profiling of student performance on the learning competencies and standards of the curriculum. Various kinds of assessments shall be used appropriately for different learners who come from diverse contexts, such as cultural background, and life expectancies. Classroom assessment is an ongoing process of identifying, gathering, organizing, and interpreting quantitative and qualitative information about what learners know and can do. Teachers should employ classroom assessment methods that are consistent with curriculum standards. It is important for teachers to always inform learners about the objectives of the lesson so that the latter will aim to meet or even exceed the standards. The teacher provides immediate feedback to students about their learning progress. Classroom assessment also measures the achievement of competencies by the learners. There are two types of classroom assessment, namely formative and summative. Formative assessment may be seen as assessment for learning, so teachers can make adjustments in their instruction. It is also assessment as learning, wherein students reflect on their own progress. According to the UNESCO Program on Teaching and Learning for a Sustainable Future, formative assessment refers to the ongoing forms of assessment that are closely linked to the learning process. It is characteristically informal and is intended to help students identify strengths and weaknesses in order to learn from the assessment experience. Formative assessment may be given at any time during the teaching and learning process. It is also a way to check the effectiveness of instruction. Formative assessment involves teachers using evidence about what learners know and can do to inform and improve their teaching. Teachers observe and guide learners and their tasks through interaction and dialogue, thus gaining deeper insights into the learner's progress, strengths, weaknesses, and needs. The results of formative assessments will help teachers make good instructional decisions so that the lessons are better suited to the learner's abilities. It is important for teachers to record formative assessment by documenting and tracking learners' progress using systematic ways that can easily provide insight into the students' learning. Such monitoring will also allow teachers to understand their students and thus teach them better. Formative assessment results, however, are not included in the computation of summative assessment. Formative assessment must also provide students with immediate feedback on how well they are learning throughout the teaching-learning process. Recommendations on how they can improve themselves should also be given by the teachers. Formative assessment enables students to take responsibility for their own learning and identify areas where they do well and where they need help. As a result, students will appreciate and make their own decisions about their progress. Summative assessment, on the other hand, may be seen as assessment of learning, which occurs at the end of a particular unit. This form of assessment usually occurs towards the end of a period of learning in order to describe the standard reached by the learner. Often, this takes place in order for appropriate decisions about future learning or job suitability to be made. Judgments derived from summative assessment are usually for the benefit of people other than the learner. Summative assessment measures whether learners have met the content and performance standards. Teachers must use methods to measure student learning that have been deliberately designed to assess how well students have learned and are able to apply their learning in different contexts. The results of summative assessments are recorded and used to report on the learner's achievement. Primarily, the results of a summative assessment are reported to the learners and their parents or guardians. In addition, these are reported to principals, school heads, teachers who will receive the child in the next grade level, and guidance teachers who should help students cope with challenges they experience in school. Assessment in the classroom is aimed at helping students perform well in relation to the learning standards. Learning standards comprise content standards, performance standards, and learning competencies that are outlined in the curriculum. Content standards identify and set the essential knowledge and understanding that should be learned. They cover a specified scope of sequential topics within each learning strand, domain, theme, or component. Content standards answer the question, what should the learner know? Performance standards describe the abilities and skills that learners are expected to demonstrate in relation to the content standards and integration of 21st century skills. The integration of knowledge, understanding, and skills is expressed through creation, innovation, and adding value to products or performance during the independent work or in collaboration with others. Performance standards answer the following questions. What can learners do with what they know? How well must learners do their work? How well do learners use their learning or understanding in different situations? How do learners apply their learning or understanding in real-life contexts? What tools and measures should learners use to demonstrate what they know? Learning competencies refer to the knowledge, understanding, skills, and attitudes that students need to demonstrate in every lesson and/or learning activity. Concept development. The learning standards in the curriculum reflect progressions of concept development. The cognitive process dimensions, adapted from Anderson and Kraftwall, 2001, may be a good way to operationalize these progressions. It provides a scheme for classifying educational goals, objectives, and standards. It also defines a broad range of cognitive processes from basic to complex, as follows: remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. All classroom assessment activities, whether formative or summative, should comply with the following broad principles to make them fair and clear for all learners. Assessment must align with the curriculum and relate directly to the content and performance standards and competencies. Assessment must be valid. Assessment must be reliable and consistent. Assessment must be fair and inclusive. Assessment must be manageable for both learners and teachers. Assessment must give learners a range of ways to demonstrate their achievements. Assessment must be part of a transparent, ongoing process where learners' progress is monitored over time. Teachers and learners must use feedback effectively to improve learning and reflect on the teaching and learning process. Inclusive assessment. The principles of effective assessment stress that assessment should be inclusive and fair for all learners in a class. For education to be inclusive, every learner must be in school or have access to education through an alternative delivery mode. Schools, learning environments, classrooms, and programs and activities should be developed and designed so that all learners can attend school, learn with others, and participate in school activities. Learners, including Muslim learners in the madrasa education system, must feel that they can participate fully in and contribute to all aspects of school life. Every class in the Philippines is diverse because each learner is unique. It is important that you recognize that all learners in your class have the capacity to learn. You bring this out in your learners by the way you interact with them. For example, in your class, you may have individuals or groups of learners who are members of indigenous peoples' communities, have disabilities, come from various parts of the Philippines, speak different mother tongue languages, come from low socio-economic backgrounds, have various religious affiliations, or come from remote areas. In some large urban schools, you may have classes that include many of these learner types. Some of you may also teach a diverse group of learners through alternative delivery modes. It is your responsibility as a teacher to ensure that your teaching, learning, and assessment practices support successful learning for all these learners. The following are the samples of assessment tools of various modalities by subject areas. That would be all for today. Thank you for listening. Keep safe and amping always.